sure you don't spoil the house that you rented. The terms are usual, they are common. That's why it's so similar, because most landlords want the same thing: on time payment.
But do you think it favors the tenants, right? I mean, some of these agreements, because looking back, it feels one-sided. The agreement favors one side of the divide.
Ironically, not even ironically, funnily enough, tenancy laws protect the tenant and not really the landlord. It's why tenancy law says if you're a yearly tenant, you get 6 months notice unless otherwise agreed.
Okay.
They try to, that as a landlord, you can't just kick a tenant out of your house.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. But let's
say, the law is making provisions to at least protect the tenant and make sure you're not just kicked out.
Okay. Yeah.
So, in my opinion, anyway, I say this all the time, that tenancy laws that exist are more favorable to the tenant and not the landlord.
But financially, can I argue with the landlord and say, hey, you can't just increase rent arbitrarily? I just moved in last year. I'm paying, let's say, 300,000, 400,000, and now you're saying, hey, because of inflation, I'm going to take it to 1.5 million. I mean, where do I start from? Think about it.
Here's the thing. And this is why, before you rent a house, you want to enter like a proper agreement and not some of those regurgitated ones.
Okay.
Because if you're a tenant and you have a lawyer look at the tenancy agreement, they can include a term like you can't increase rent above a certain amount within the first 3 years. Right? You have the option when you're starting a tenancy agreement to tell the landlord, okay, man, I don't hear anything like all these stories right here outside from you. And you can input that into your tenancy agreement and sign it. And once he signs that for the first 3 years he will not increase, that will be binding on him. The problem is a lot of people just enter into these houses without really the agreement they are signing, because it is one of those regurgitated words we talk about. So it won't present interest in any special way. It will just... That's why it looks one-sided. It looks like it's favoring the landlord because he has given you an agreement that does not hold him to any kind of standard. He can do anything he likes.
So he can increase. Sorry, so he can increase the rent anytime. If he says, you know what, you've stayed in my house 8 months. I don't like your face like that. I would increase the rent.
I know it sounds a bit off, but the truth is, there's this principle called freedom of contract.
Yeah.
Right? I teach contract law in school in RSU, and I'm always telling my students, freedom of contract means you and I can enter into any agreement we like. If it looks unethical or unfair to another person, well, not unethical, but unfair to someone else, it doesn't matter. If you and I have anything we want, put it inside and sign.
All right, we connect while we go on the commercial break, and I have so many more questions on agreements. There is a situation, there's a story, a real life story in Port Harcourt as well. We're going to throw that into the mix where a landlord gives quick notice before expiration of rent and has refused to refund the remainder of time in that apartment. But let's go for a quick break. Hello Port Harcourt continues with Kala Dakoru Batibo and Franka Igweala. Nigeriainfo. Yours truly, Kalada Korubatsubo in the studio. And we are talking tenancy situation in Rivers State. And my guest is a lecturer at the Rivers State University and a lawyer based in Port Harcourt. Of course, a lecturer that she teaches at in the Rivers University. Franka, Igweala, have you back on the show. Wonderful.
Back.
It looks like the economy has got nothing in you, yeah?
I'm adapting.
That's on a lighter note. All right, so before the break, we were talking, and you told us how the law on tenancy agreement favors the tenant, but it looks like the tenant is in the know of this, and that's why he goes into negotiations with the landlord and is on the losing side. Now, you also said that you can negotiate with the landlord to say, hey, you're not going to increase, you can put the clause and say you're not going to increase rent in the next 2 years, in the next 3 years. Can you also negotiate how much can be the addition in that increment? Can you negotiate that? 10%, 5%, something like that?
I mean, you can, but usually you get some pushback from the landlord because he'll be like, he has to decide based on inflation rates and so on and so forth. What you can do is say it will not be more than a certain percentage. You can't go up more than half of the current value. The truth is, honestly, you can negotiate anything, right? At the beginning stage, when you're entering into the house for the first time, you can tell him, please, I don't want stress, And if he doesn't agree, you go look for another landlord, another house who will. I mean, when people house hunt, you don't take the first house that is available, right? So I think, and again, I advise this all the time, when you're just entering into a tenancy agreement, make all your desires known at that point and have the landlord be on the same page with you so that they don't give you any shocks and surprises, 8 months into your stay.
So, talking about regulation, I think it's just somewhere. I saw an article in Lagos State. The House of Assembly is looking at promulgating a law that can regulate how landlords increase rent. I think in another state, was it the southeastern part of the country? I can't remember now.
Yes.
How possible do you think that law, or how efficient, what's the efficacy if such a law does exist in a country like Nigeria?
The thing is, one of our biggest problems in Nigeria is enforcement. We have a lot of good law. We have a lot of acts that are commendable, that are mirrored after even better options abroad. Promulgating the law is not an issue. Enforcement, on the other hand, we struggle. Okay, so sometimes you tell somebody this is what the law says, they'll say that won't concern you. So again, all your leverage is at the beginning as a tenant. When you are entering the house, if such a law passes in Rivers State, for instance, you're entering the house and the landlord says rent is 6 million, but the law says it shouldn't be more than 2 million. You let him know. Okay, this is not what the law says. If he refuses, you don't enter into that contract. Because here's the thing. Whatever the law may say, in terms of contractual relationships, the parties involved can decide to not follow the law and it will be valid.
Oh, really?
And I say that, again, only in relation to contract.
Yeah.
If the contract says a landlord should give you 6 months notice, or the law says a landlord should give you 6 months notice, but you and the landlord say, you can give me 2 weeks notice, it's fine. I can give me 3 months notice, it's fine. The 3 months notice is what will
So you've waived your rights to the application of that law. Okay.
Exactly. You have the freedom of contract to decide what is binding on you. As long as it's not illegal, as long as it's not against public policy, you guys are good. You get. So even if they put this law down and they say this is how you negotiate or what you agree to, I think a lot of times tenants are very desperate. They're trying to move out of their current place, so they don't accept anything. That's when it now bites them later.
Yeah, true. So one last question on negotiations. So a lot of landlords right now are increasing rent, and of course we understand the state of the economy, right? But can you argue, even though it's not in the contract, can you take that to court and say this is human? The crime or quantity of the rent is against the law It is extreme profiteering. I mean, you can use any of lawyers. You have terms for all of this. You have terminologies for this. Is it possible?
Well, if a landlord increases, because I actually know a colleague, her rent went from I think 1.5 or 2 million to 3.5
Okay.
this year.
Yeah.
She's supposed to renew. She renews in February, right?
Yeah.
And in January, the landlord gives them a letter like, and what does she do? She moves out. That's what you do when they give such. Can't take them to court because it's not illegal what they're doing. They are free to set their own prices, and if they find somebody who is willing to pay, the person will pay. I mean,
but moving out to the other house. It's not like the other landlord.
That was quite difficult.
Okay.
And some of them were asking for 2 years upfront. And
is that illegal? Is that illegal 2 years upfront?
It's not illegal. Like I said, whatever you agree to enter into is binding. So, unfortunately, I think maybe there are some, maybe in Lagos, I'm not certain, but there have been attempts to stop,
cap it. Yeah, I think in Lagos, they capped it to 1 year.
Yes, where they can't let you ask for more than one, but that's not applicable here.
Okay.
And so people pay 5-year leases, 10-year leases, especially businesses. So it's not illegal, When a business like a supermarket wants to rent a place and it's a really big brand, they usually will rent for a long time, So it's not illegal to ask for X amount of years upfront. But I mean, I hate to say this, but if I can be the devil's advocate, you and the landlord are going to the same market.
Yeah, okay.
That rent is their income.
Okay.
And the fact that they've had the house for 10 years is not really relevant because 10 years ago, they didn't need, the prices of things were not the same. Back then, they charged as much as they could based on prices then. They need the money. They also need, the way you're asking for salary increase from whoever our bosses are, they need to also increase.
You sound like you're part of the landlord association. You sound like that, right? I know you're a lawyer and you're playing the advocate, but you sound like you're part of the. So let's talk agency rates, right? Agency rates. Agents have also been one attributing factor. So I have heard. I do know that the agency law says 5%, but in places like Lagos, we're hearing in places like Abuja 15-20%. I don't know what it's like in Port Harcourt. I think you recently went house shopping. What was it like? Or you didn't use an agent?
We did use an agent, but he was recommended by a family, so he was not too cutthroat.
Oh, okay.
He was calm.
Nepotism. He's been nepotic in his work. But yeah, go ahead.
Man helped us. But what is the general? What the law says in terms of agency and commissions is 5% from each person. So they get 5% from the landlord, 5% from the tenant, or 10% from one of them, depending on agreement.
All right.
Right. Remember, if a tenant wants to take an agent wants to take 20%, and he asks for 20%, and you agree, it is valid. They must not.
Right in the Constitution, and if that is the case, right in the Constitution,
the Allied Matters Act, right? However, when you want to register a company, do something called Articles of Association, which is like the company's constitution. In that constitution, you can decide to do a different procedure for removing
the director. Yeah.
It will be valid. The only time that the comma will apply is if you have no provision in your articles on removing directors. So what does this mean? The law exists as a guide, but you can decide what your guide is.
All right. I get you now.
So, in terms of this agency and the 10%, the law says take 10%. If we do not say otherwise.
All right. It's crazy.
Meaning we can say otherwise. Agents can say, screw that 10%. I want 50%.
All right.
Now, your job as the person you're offering a 50% deal to is to say, no, I don't agree to that. And then you don't pay.
Okay, I'm going to go to the phone lines now. I want the listeners to join our very fun conversation this wonderful Thursday morning on Hello Port Harcourt here on 93.3 Nigeriainfo. You know the phone lines if you're an avid listener. But if you're a first timer, I would say welcome to church. And this is my church and you're my congregation. I'm the pastor. And the number to call is 0817 923 0002 and 0817 923 0003. And I have 6416. You can send your messages and I'll take them. Remember the situation in the Port Harcourt Metropolis. Is it fair to agree the economy is terrible? Okay, I'm not saying it from a political angle. I'm just saying inflation is up there and the prices of things are very high. But, does this also mean that landlords should increase the rent astronomically as they have done? And does it mean that they have to pay, the way we pay rent? So is it exploitative or is it fair? I'd like to hear from you. Well, Franka, let's come back to you. There is a story I heard just yesterday, while planning to have this conversation. And that story talked about how a landlord had a faulty gen that was smoking. And, it was dangerous to the health of the tenants who are just, giving birth to a baby. And when they complained, landlord is refusing to balance, or how do you do it?
No, I know the things that are non-refundable are things. In their agreement, did they agree that he would refund them if they, especially at his behest? These are usually spelled out in the tenancy agreement. There are out, and I've seen this, where the tenancy agreement says if you move out before your rent expires, I will not refund you. Especially if you move out and I didn't chase you. I've seen terms like that, and the tenant has signed. In that kind of situation, I know it is fair to get your money back, but if you've agreed you will not get your money back, you will not get your money back. I want to say this because I don't want to come off like I'm team landlords. What they are doing is, it can be argued to be exploitative, and we can even say that they shouldn't do it, but they are not breaking the law.
All right, they are not breaking the law. I've got a call, and that's Richard, and Richard is calling me from... Richard is calling from Igweala, right? So I'm going to take Richard's call. Richard, welcome on the show. Good morning to you.
Yeah, good morning.
Yeah, Richard, welcome.
Richard calling from Igweala.
All right, let's hear your thoughts then.
Yeah, for respect of what you have discussed, that's an issue I have right now in my compound.
Okay. All right.
In respect of this water issue, we are paying water rate every month is 2,000 naira. That's what we are paying.
Okay.
2,000. Then he answered that it's going to pump 1 day in, 1 day off, and at the tank we are using, it's not even up to 1,000 liters. So now, if you want to pump 1 day, you only pump once for the whole day. Then the next day there will not be water. And now what I'm confronted with us, it's not done that way. This tank is not even up to 1,000 liters. We are 4, including the landlord, we are 4 in the yard. So can you give us 1 in a day? The rest of the day there will not be water. At 7 o'clock there will not be water. Till the next day there will not be water. Till next the upper day. Now right now I'm talking to you, there's no water in the compound. It's not pumping to the fire. That's not a problem with me.
Is it that there is no power supply? Sorry, Richard. Richard, let me understand you. Is it that there is no power supply in that compound?
Last time I'm talking to you, there's a power supply. I'm talking with a slide in the Igweala. So I'm talking with a slide. If now said because of the tariff. Yeah, I'm now giving 1 day off, 1 day, it's not a problem. But the day that we are going to pump, give us 2 times pumping against the next day that you are not going to pump. That's what did he say? That the next one I complained, just say that is the money I paid for. If I don't want I should go start at fresh water.
Interesting.
I don't know if we can on this issue, but right now it's bringing a problem into the compound.
From what I've learned on the show, it depends on your agreement with your landlord. So I don't know what agreement you guys entered into water payment and water supply and all of that stuff. So maybe you want to renegotiate. Maybe you want to renegotiate the fee and all of that.
Can you hear me clear?
I can hear you very clearly. The
agreement this thing just started about 2 weeks ago. That's why we had the meeting. fine. I am not doubting because of fine. I understand God is tariff. But my problem is that we're having 1 day in 1 day off. But the 1 day that you're going to pump the water, let it be 2 times for the day because the tank is too small.
All right.
It's not even up to 1,000 liters.
All right.
Then, if there's no water, we understood there's no water. We are not pumping that day.
All right.
Yes, sir. But just give us 2 times. They actually pump water for just a day. Then the next day that you will not pump water, then we'll be to suffer for water, be to pass and look for water. Then it can go just 2 times.
All right.
No wahala. I don't have a problem with that.
All right. Richard, thank you. We'll look into your matter. I'm sorry. It looks like you don't have water in your apartment. So sorry for that. I've got Divine. Divine is calling from Woji. Divine, good morning.
Good morning, Canada.
Yeah, good morning.
I'm a bit worried for what I'm hearing. And you say I should pack out and I pack out before my money or give me part of my money that is left. There's an issue. I will not pack out. I will not pack out if you get to that point. Mind you, Canada, I will look for a church that can make noise or people that can make noise. When it's asleep by 1 a.m., we will get to the front of the door. They will not be also.
All right.
So we know what the pain is.
All right.
But the law is so funny here.
All right, Divine, thank you. But Franka, can we sue a landlord who does something as hazardous to his tenants? Because generator fumes can kill. Carbon is a carbon dioxide. It can kill.
Of course. No, that is not a tenancy issue.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
That would be a criminal matter, grievous bodily harm, assault. You have now left the ambit of contract law and you're now dealing with criminal issues. So it's not. Of course, if you cause me any kind of harm, you're liable to some kind of court.
Okay, so what about the water situation? As funny as it sounds, it's a problem in many compounds or many houses. The issue of sewage, the issue of water, the issue of
the landlord ought to handle the compound, right? You as a tenant, usually these are houses with multiple units, right?
Yeah, true.
You as a tenant, you are responsible for your unit, and the landlord ought to take care of the common areas. But again, what did you guys agree? If the landlord walked in, if he put it into the contract that you would handle that, then you would handle that. If it's not mentioned, because there are tenancy agreements that don't mention all these details, we just talk about rent and in such situations, it is customary for the landlord to handle common areas things like sewage and
Okay.
He certainly can be argued to be in breach if he's not doing what he's supposed to do.
All right. But really, now let's remove the cloak of being a lawyer from you, and let's look at this as a Nigerian.
Yes.
Do you think landlords should be regulated? Now, I understand that the economy is where it is right now. But do you think there should be some kind of regulation and say, okay, how much do you think we can peg a 1-bedroom at in a particular area, a posh area, for instance? Do you think we should begin to do that?
Do I think we should? Yes, of course. It will be much more beneficial to tenants.
Okay.
But I can understand why it hasn't happened yet.
Why hasn't it happened?
We're a very precarious nation.
What do you mean by
things change a lot?
Okay.
Yeah, Well, the fuel hike was one of the most shocking.
Oh my! That for your time and for your expertise as well. All right, it's been a fun conversation. The question and do you think a rental situation in